So overall, thank you for coming and joining me with this. I just wanted to give a little introduction of who the Art of Ecology and Marissa Jacobs is. I run this little business that the whole point of it is blending art and science to create these visual connections between people and nature. And I do that through workshops and programs like this. I have lots of art available, so many different ways to get involved as well. I have upcoming programs, so if anybody is local who will be watching this, I would love to see you. I have terrarium programs, but I also have, for people who are not local, other virtual presentations as well. And similarly to this program, where 25% of the proceeds benefits a conservation group, that's the same for everything that I do, because when I do environmental science, I don't just want to teach people about this one little topic, but I also want to give back to conservation or habitat preservation efforts as well. But for what we're doing here today with this presentation, this is kind of our outline for what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about understanding how plants and animals are connected to each other and the importance of that in our ecosystem. And we're going to do that by traveling to 3 places that I was at when I went to Kenya this past time. We're going to start with the Maasai Mara. We're going to head over to the Lake Victoria region in central Kenya, and then go to Nairobi City, which is also where the Kibera slums are, and talk about some actions at the very end to take for the animals and plants that we love. Let's start with why a lot of people tend to like African animals. These are something called charismatic megafauna. We see these animals and we often are like, oh, they're so cute. They're really big. They're full of expression. We put them in children's nurseries. We ask little kids what their favorite animal is, and many times it's one of these cool animals. How do we feel when we see these? Do you feel like, ew, they're ugly, or do you feel like, wow, they're kind of cool?
They're exotic, because they don't exist in the areas of the world where I live. So seeing them makes me feel very special.
Yeah, that's the case for most people. We see these animals at a zoo, and it's this really special experience. How about this one? It's a snail. Does the snail elicit the same sort of emotion or feeling of excitement that the zebra or the giraffe or the elephant did?
Not quite the same, but it's very interesting. But there's still a little bit of sense of, ew.
Yeah.
I would say for me, I'm still filled with wonder, because I think of a monopod and how does this thing really move from point A to B? You know, and I'm just a curious person and think of a lot of questions. But I am much more familiar with snails already, so it doesn't elicit the excitement of seeing a rhinoceros.
Right. And one of the things that you touched on, they are absolutely fascinating creatures. Snails are very amazing with the way that they eat, the role that they play in the ecosystem, but they definitely have that kind of sort of factor. They're slimy, they're close to the ground, they eat rotten things. They don't have fur, which many of these charismatic megafaunas, or huge, exciting creatures, have fur, and we can relate to them really well. They have eyes that we can connect with, and snails have eye stalks, which is a little weird. The charismatic megafauna, they are species that are the poster children for conservation work. When we see them, we get really excited and we fall in love with that animal. And then when we fall in love with the animal, we're more inclined to take care of them and to be active in their conservation efforts. So a lot of times when we are protecting animals, we use these examples of these big, wonderful, smiley, happy animals. But all of the animals are connected. And by the end of this presentation, we'll see obviously lots of the charismatic megafauna, but we'll also see some uncharismatic mini fauna as well. And I hope that at the end, we can understand more of their role and how we can protect them as well. We'll start with the Maasai Mara. Here is kind of a very quintessential scene of the lone tree in the middle of the grassland. The Maasai Mara is an African savanna biome, which is primarily the grasslands, and that's what the animals in this area are really going to feed off of. The herbivores are going to be eating the seeds and the grasses, and then the predators are going to come in and eat those herbivores. Maasai Mara means like the spotted Maasai land. And if you were to look at an aerial view, you would see these lone trees just spotting like the spots of a cheetah over the entire plain. Obviously, though, looking at this photo, you can see that there is some diversity here. There is lots of lush green areas. There's a river that does run through, and along the river, it is much more green and lush. And you can see some of the animals down here in the bottom enjoying those grasses. But something that I found really fascinating, and it kind of stuck out to me, was that the Maasai Mara Preserve is 583 square miles. This is all preserved land by the government and by the communities. There are over 590 different animal species that have been recorded to live in the Maasai Mara. Pennsylvania, which is where I live, is 80 times larger than the Maasai Mara. It's roughly 40,000 square miles. Yet in all of Pennsylvania, only 480 total species of animals have been recorded here. Not to say that there's not more that haven't been recorded here, but the fact that something 80 times smaller has almost 100 species, a little over 100 species more recorded and easily seen, really imparts the idea that this is a rich, very biodiverse region that needs our protection. And we're going to start with my personal favorite of the giraffe, a very, very charismatic megafauna, which I actually learned is one of the quote-unquote least charismatic of the megafauna. In much of their conservation work, giraffes rank lower than elephants, cheetahs, and rhinos. For some odd reason, people think that these are weird with their super long necks. There are currently 4 different species of giraffe: the Maasai, northern, southern, and reticulated. And there are 5 to 9 subspecies of giraffe as well. The easiest way to identify or distinguish between them is by looking at their spots or the patches and how far down the leg they go. Their absolute favorite food is the acacia tree, and they'll use that really long, sticky tongue to wrap around the tree to grab what they need to eat. They can go for many, many days without drinking. And what is another animal that we think of right away that lives in hot climates and doesn't drink for a really long time?
Camel.
What was that other than me?
Camels.
Camels, yes. I would love to fall into that category. But giraffes are actually closely related to camels, so it makes sense that their adaptations would be similar as well.
I can see the face. Facial structure.
Yeah, they're a little derpy and have big eyes.
Derpy?
Derpy with a P.
Derpy.
Or goofy.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was a organic, biological.
Yes, that is a
term that I don't know.
scientific definition. Nah, they're a little goofy. But something amazing about how they are specially adapted to drink is with their blood vessels. Their neck is just like a human neck. All mammals have 7 vertebrae in their neck. Giraffes are the same way, it's just their vertebrae are absolutely massive. And so their neck is elongated. And when they go to drink, it's a long neck, but it's not long enough to actually reach the ground. So they have to spread their legs really far out and then lower their head. I have felt it before, I'm sure many of us have, where we get out of bed too quickly and feel really dizzy because of the change in elevation so suddenly. Giraffes has to deal with this all the time. So they have valves and vessels in their neck that manage the flow of blood, preventing backflow into the brain from toxic blood going backwards, and help keep oxygenated blood circling through so that they don't get dizzy when they just go to take a drink of water, because then they would never want to go to take a drink of water for fear of their brain exploding. So it's amazing how different animals have different adaptations to help them survive. Despite this giant size, they're still predated upon, especially when they're born. When they're newborns, they don't have fully developed bone structures. They don't know how to run yet. They have to learn very, very quickly. But if there's a predator that can watch from the distance and say, ooh, that mother looks like she's going to give birth soon, I'm going to hang out and wait. It'll be very easy for them to hunt a newborn giraffe. However, again, back to the giant size of them, the moms are obviously going to be very protective. Their femur is about the size and weight of an average 8-year-old here in Pennsylvania. It's about 70 pounds. And one swift kick to the head of a lion can really damage that lion, if not kill them, and show the other lions in a pride or other hyenas that are ganging up who's boss. Unfortunately, their population is down, mainly due to habitat fragmentation, which is caused by population growth. As human population rises, they're spreading farther and farther out. Roads are being built, structures are being built, new houses are coming in. And if you think of the fact that a giraffe's primary food source is the acacia tree, that first picture of the Maasai Mara with that one lone tree, that was an acacia. Think of now all of the giraffes in the Maasai Mara are surviving on the acacia tree, and they're going to the one tree, and then they have to continue traveling to the next tree. But they need enough food to sustain their large size. They need a really large amount of space in order to survive and to have their population thrive. So when roads are cut through, when houses are built, it really reduces the amount of viable habitat that they have. I'm going to use the giraffe as this kind of simulation here to talk about general conservation and why conserving these animals is so important. But this overall theme can be applied to every single animal in their own special way. So, who here has been, within the past couple of days, impacted by a giraffe?
My hand is up.
Your hand is up. You've been impacted by giraffes in the past couple of days? Cool. How?
They ate out of my hands. Or maybe I impacted the giraffe.
You gave them giraffe treats.
Yes.
Yes. You are a small population.
I had close encounter with giraffe.
Yeah?
And that giraffe licked me 2 times. My hand was like jellyish and slime. so I had to wash my hand after that. That was good.
That was good. Yep.
Marissa,
Yes.
do you see that Josh has joined?
I do not see that. No, I can't see I can't actually see any of you now because I can only see my presentation.
Okay. Okay.
But hi, Josh. Welcome. Many of us here over in America are not impacted or do not think that they are impacted. I asked my husband if he thought that he was impacted by giraffes on a weekly basis or so, and he said other than the fact that I talk about them all the time, he did not think he was impacted by giraffes. I have asked coworkers if they think that they've been impacted by giraffes, and the overall answer here in America, unless we've had these really great experiences where we've got to see these giraffes up close, most people don't think that they are impacted by giraffes. But I'm going to give you kind of this really broad, vague, I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of the scientific processes of what's going on here. But think we've got our big giraffe and we're going across the Maasai Mara, we're traveling across Kenya looking for food, and we find our acacia tree. And we go and we munch on some of the leaves. Yum, this is great, tastes wonderful, but wow, something is biting my tongue. I don't like this. I'm going to stop eating this tree. There are ants that live on the acacia tree that help to protect the acacia from browsers or animals that eat trees like the giraffe. They'll go and they'll bite the tongues, and the giraffe will stop and they'll go and move on to the next tree. But if we think of any time that we've deadheaded flowers here in our garden, that we've pruned a tree, that we've pruned our rose bushes, a slight pruning or removal of branches can actually stimulate growth of the plant. And it's the same thing for these giraffes. They'll go and they will pretty much prune these acacia trees and stimulate the acacia tree's growth. That stimulates seed dispersion. So as the acacia tree is saying, yes, I feel great, I can allocate resources and energy better, I'm going to put out new leaves, new seed pods, more seeds are produced. As the giraffe eats those seeds, and that long tongue that I had shown before wraps around the tree, collecting pollen as it goes and then goes off to the next tree, the giraffe is going to poop on the way to the next tree, and that disperses the acacia seeds. As it goes to lick and wrap its tongue around the acacia, it's going to pollinate that tree. Now we have a really healthy community of acacia trees, some that have sprouted up and germinated and others that have been pollinated. Now we have the acacia tree who's growing real strong. He's been pollinated, seeds are germinating. Acacia trees are some absolutely incredible nutrient cyclers, where their roots and the way that they use minerals and resources in the soil will actually help to kind of stir or till the soil and move the nutrients around, which creates highly fertile soil. If you have highly fertile soil, you can help other things to grow up, other understory shrubs or grasses that birds rely on. You can, especially in regions that really rely on agriculture, you can help crops thrive. And ultimately, it prevents desertification, which is when, due to excessive heat and drought, plants die out and the soil becomes barren. Agriculture thrives. In Kenya, there's a ton of tea and coffee agriculture. I know personally, when I go to the grocery store and look for coffee, I'm biased. So instead of picking up the Guatemalan or Colombian bean, I'll pick up the Kenyan bean. But it's so common that I can just go to Giant. I don't have to go to a fancy grocery store or a fancy coffee place to get Kenyan coffee beans. It's widespread. how many people have drank tea or had coffee within the past week?
Me.
You have been impacted by giraffes.
That's true, because I drank Kenyan tea.
Yes. And even if you think, oh, well, I did drink the Colombian or the Guatemalan or Ethiopian coffee or had different types of tea, there are so many people, though, around us that we interact with on a day-to-day basis that will drink these Kenyan coffee beans that help support the Kenyan economy by buying these products, and we enjoy them. I know personally, I can drink tea as a relaxation, a very calming thing, and then coffee is like a pick-me-up, makes me feel better. So on a mental and physical well-being note, I'm impacted by them as well. Everything is connected. Even if we don't immediately think, yeah, I'm impacted by giraffes, in some way, shape, or form, what happens in Kenya impacts us here, and what happens here, vice versa, will impact Kenya, will impact China, everywhere around the globe. So using that thought process, it was a vague thought process, didn't go too deep there with it, but you can see that how we behave and how we act and act as stewards of the environment impacts everything around us. So take this and apply it to every single animal for the rest of the presentation. Maybe not with tea and acacia trees, but on their own sort of level. And we're going to start with the cheetah, because I know somebody here loves the cheetahs. But they are similar to leopards, except for the fact that leopards have rosettes, which would be like a squiggly open line with a dot in the middle instead of just spots. And cheetahs also have these tear marks down their nose. Cheetahs have 1 to 6 cubs per litter. However, due to predation and rampant disease in the cheetah population, very few of them will actually survive, even with the large number of cubs that they have at once. So we'll talk in a little bit about one of the real downsides of being a cheetah that can impact the survival of cubs. But for now, we'll just focus on the cute real quick. We saw this behavior a little bit with some of the cheetahs walking around, where they go to stand up on a thing. And they'll stand on termite mounds or rocks, and they'll survey the grasslands for their food source. And if you look at this picture, the grass is kind of the same color as the cheetah, kind of the same color as other animals that live in Kenya. So it can be a little challenging for the cheetahs to look out and just say, oh, there's a gazelle I want to eat. So they'll survey from this higher vantage point. Once they hunt, they have to rest. So we all know cheetahs are the fastest land mammal. They're lightning quick to an extreme. Their body can't actually handle that. So they have to put a lot of thought and pre-analyzing into their hunt. Once they hunt, their body will put and allocate so much energy into the rapid sprint that they actually will be so tired that they can't really move after the couple of seconds that it takes for them to run. They have to rest. And it's to the point where other animals will say, hey, that's a cheetah. I know if I wait a little bit, I can see if I can steal its food or attack its cubs, because the mom won't be able to fight me off. So they will have to say, okay, I see that gazelle in the distance. Number one, is it close enough for me to catch within the time that I have? Number two, is it close enough for me to catch within the time? And is there a safe enough place for me to then drag my food that I can hide in the tall grasses that I was looking out in to avoid detection, to prevent the hyenas from stealing my cubs or the food that I caught? So that's one reason why cheetahs they're having a real hard time surviving. They're at a disadvantage here. Their population is dwindling again due to the low cub survival rate, but also because of the illegal pet trade. So people will see, oh, look at the baby cheetah, it's so cute, which I get. They're adorable. But having pets that are actually wildlife can definitely lead to severe complications. So pet trade has been illegal, and also due to human wildlife conflicts. For most of the animals that we see, even ones that we don't think of as predators, just due to the population growth of humans, and now the human world and the wild world are kind of butting up against each other, there's going to be more chances for humans and these predators to come into contact, and that can cause some serious problems.
Only 7,000.
And that 7,000 is like total left in the world, which when you think of how many animals are required for a healthy gene pool, that's 7,000 is very little.
Yeah, so that wasn't just 7,000 in Kenya, that's 7,000 in the world.
Correct.
So the fact that a couple weeks ago we just ran into cheetahs was a really rare event.
An amazing one too. Now, if you think of going to Kenya, that is the place where cheetahs are. So it's kind of like, you know, if you ran into a cheetah in China, that would be really rare. But you're going to the place where that 7,000 is kind of concentrated, but it still is an amazing experience to have, to see 2 of the 7,000.
I think there are total 7,001 cheetahs.
7,001?
Oh, yeah. There's an additional one that likes to walk on 2 legs.
So talented. There you go. All right, so next we've got the hyena. They're kind of cool in the sense that they are more closely related to cats than they are to dogs, even though when we look at the face, it's much more that longer snout. So we think a dog, and especially with their bark or yip. However, anatomically and genetically, they are closely related to cats. So that's kind of a fun fact there. But females are the dominant, just like the next animal we'll take a look at. They're the leaders of their group. And whenever they do a hunt or they find food, again, a lot of times they're going to be scavenging and stealing from cheetahs. They are going to be the first to feed, and they're going to gorge themselves. And then whoever's lower on the totem pole will have to kind of fight for themselves and see if they can scrape any food away. Fortunately for hyenas, their population is relatively high in comparison to some of these other African species. But again, just like everything here, habitat fragmentation is really taking a toll on their range. And I know when I was there, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard hyenas doing their weird little laugh, and don't know exactly how close they were, but that was close enough for me to be asleep and have hyenas around. And so when you think of humans and wildlife coming up that close to each other, just like every other animal, there are human-wildlife conflicts. Another matriarchal animal is the elephant. Easiest way to distinguish between an Indian elephant and the African elephant is to look at their ear. For the African elephant, their ear is shaped like the continent of Africa, which is super cool that they're just designed that way. But you can also look at their back. African elephants, as you can kind of see a little bit here, their backs have a hump on it, and Indian elephants have a dip to them. So when you see pictures of people riding elephants, they are usually, or using them for agricultural tools, they're usually Indian elephants because they're a little bit easier to sit on top of. Just one elephant can eat, depending on its age, 250 to 500 pounds of grass. However, they have been recorded to eat 600 pounds of grass every single day. They require at least 50 gallons of water, which is about if you filled up a standard bathtub here in America of water, that's roughly 48 to 50 gallons. If you think of all the elephants that are there, and they're eating all of this, they're spending most of their day grazing in these tall grasses. Their range, just like the giraffe, needs to be immense in order to support that population. You are going to see a grandma who is the head matriarch. She lives with her daughters. So if you see a super old elephant and then some adult elephants, and then little babies, you can tell that it's a grandma, her daughters, and then the daughters' children, whether they're male or female.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
I understand how you can tell the adult from the toddlers, elephants, the young elephants.
Mm-hmm.
How would you tell the difference between a grandmother and daughter, but still, you know, like a mother elephant?
Size. So here you can't see the 3 generations, so it's hard to tell, but this is a grandma and some grandchildren. The mom would be like halfway to 2/3 of the size of grandma. You could also tell by the wrinkles, just like in people. The more wrinkles they have, the older they are.
Okay.
And the tusks will be longer as well. But males get kicked out. Once you get of age and you can start hanging out by yourself, you don't need mom to take care of you anymore. You get kicked out of your group and you go hang out with the other boys. And you form these little bachelor pods that will then go and kind of mate with a female and then get kicked out again. And you kind of have to figure out life on your own. Overall, in the past 40 years, the general elephant, African elephant population has decreased by roughly 137,000 elephants, which is a tremendous amount. However, the Kenyan government within the past 4 or 5 years has really been putting forth an effort to decrease poaching. They've been burning ivory, doing poaching raids, because poaching is the main cause of elephant population decrease. I think it's pretty cool. A lot of conservation and veterinary and ranger groups have actually brought on ex-poachers to help them think like a poacher, to say, here's where they would put traps. Here's how we track elephants. Here's how we are able to snare them properly, and have been able to stop a lot of poaching based off of ex-poachers' experience. So I think that's a really neat kind of redemption story there, helping these elephants out. Now we've got some of the mini fauna. We're going away from the megafauna here to this black-backed jackal. And I think it's pretty cool. These are one of the few mammals in the world, not just in Kenya, but who will mate for life. They have a breeding pair that will stay together and raise the young together throughout their entire life, not just for a breeding season. Their population is fairly high. Again, declining due to habitat fragmentation, but we're going to see these sorts of dogs more than other jackals that come out at night. So it's more likely that wildlife conservationists are able to see these and study these more than some of the other jackal species. Next, we've got some ungulates. Ungulates are hoofed mammals that are like horses, zebras, impalas. And these can be identified by this little black dot on their back legs right behind their hooves. These are actually glands that can help spread their scent, get some mates, protect each other, be generally greasy. One male is going to take a harem of females. So it'll be one male to like 10 to 20 females. But it takes a lot of time to round up that many females. And it takes a lot of effort to make sure that they all stay together instead of wandering off away from the group to get eaten by a lion. So the male spends so much of his time protecting the females that he doesn't really have a lot of time to eat and take care of himself. So within about a month, month and a half, other impalas, the males here with the horns, they'll start to say, oh, that one's getting pretty weak. I bet we could take him in a fight. Within a month and a half to 3 months, one of these outside males will challenge the lead male, who's most likely going to lose because he's so hungry and so weak. The new male will come in, and the cycle kind of continues. That old male goes out, and he gets kind of a rest. He gets to eat. He gets to sleep. He doesn't have to worry about where the females are going, how they're interacting with the cheetahs and the lions. And then he'll be strong enough to either challenge the male that challenged him, or another younger male will go in for the challenge. They are very interesting because their size allows them to graze. So G is for ground. Graze on the grasses and browse also in the trees and the shrubs. Really, giraffes and zebras are the only ones that are tall enough out of the ungulates to really browse with the trees. So they are opportunistic. They're pretty adaptable. They can go for grass, they can go for trees, whatever works. So they're pretty widespread then too. And you see here, they are great jumpers and they scatter. We often think of, oh, safety in numbers to confuse predators. But with the impalas, they realize that, oh, if we're in this huge group and then scatter, a predator, especially a cheetah who only has so much time to hunt, that split second of confusion can really make or break it for their survival. And so the impalas, as they scatter, will stay safe. And you can tell here we've got a bunch of juveniles and females that don't have the horns. Out of the 590 total animal species in the Maasai Mara, 500 of them are birds. So lots and lots of bird population here. And this is definitely one of the biggest that we see in the Maasai Mara is the gray-crowned crane or the crested crane. They are omnivorous and will go eat grasses, eat berries, eat seeds, but they'll also eat insects and small reptiles as well, or amphibians, because they like wetlands. Way back when, in ancient times, when the plates of the earth were all kind of converged with Pangea, they used to actually live in Europe, but they're not very cold hardy. So as the plates broke up and the continents started moving and shifting apart, they weren't able to survive in Europe, but they were able to survive in Africa. So just like a Marissa, who really would much prefer the warm environments, so do these guys. They rely on wetland habitat. So if we go back and talk about desertification and the importance of tree survival and fertilization of soil, these birds really rely on that. If their water source is to dry up, they are going to be in bad way. They are also suffering a little bit due to an illegal trade of eggs and feather, which have been prior used in medicinal practices. And the plumage has been valued for fashion. But as the government is saying, no, we need to protect these species, that decline has slowed tremendously. Another ungulate, this is the little bitty Thomson gazelle. Other than the fact that this is an itty bitty little guy, you can also identify it by the black stripe that runs along its middle. The females are going to have itty bitty little short horns. Think of like little goat horns instead of the giant impala horns. and the males are going to have bigger horns that curve backwards. So all of the ones that you see here are going to be females. And their relationship with other ungulates is very interesting because they're so small, they need short grasses to eat. The tall grasses, they can't eat it. They can't browse from the trees. So they will actually follow herds of zebras, wildebeest, or buffaloes who they're big size. They're going to trample down all the tall grass as they walk around, which leaves the short grass available for the Thomson gazelles to graze. And again, fragmentation and an increase in agriculture is really impacting their population. But fortunately, they're at such a high population to begin with that their decline is very slow and rather manageable. With many birds in not just the Maasai Mara, but we'll talk later in the presentation as well, bird and cattle relationship is very important and very symbiotic. The birds will pick out ticks, fleas, insects, get rid of flies, which the buffalo or the cattle really appreciates, getting rid of those parasites. But they also, these cattle don't have great eyesight or sense of hearing. So the birds sitting on the back of these large animals, they will see and hear predators before the cattle does. They will make this huge crazy call when they're frightened, and that alerts the buffaloes who feel the birds on their face, on their back, and the buffaloes will say, all right, everybody circle up, protect the babies, and we're ready to rumble. You can distinguish between the male and female water buffalo mainly by how much of the horn comes down over their forehead. They all have these giant horns, and they all use them to some extent for protecting their babies and protecting their territories. But males will also fight each other over territories, and they'll use much of their forehead to kind of ram into each other. So their horns are going to come down on their forehead a little bit farther than they will on the females. We got these crazies. I think ostriches just look very bizarre with their featherless legs and their fluffy bodies, but they're kind of cool. You can tell for most birds between the male and the female by the vibrant or high contrast feathers of the male. The males are trying to get the attention of the females, who are usually a brown, gray, or more muted colors. The males are going to have, kind of like the impalas, they're going to have a harem with several females, but there's going to be a matriarch within those females. The lead female is going to say, all right, everybody, lay your eggs here, and she'll build the nest, and she'll take care of the eggs of the entire ostrich community. They, just like other animals, have to have these special adaptations for when droughts do come. The rainy season doesn't last for forever. Water sources dry up. So they get something called metabolic moisture. This is moisture that they get from their actual food diet. So the veggies that they eat or the seeds that they eat, actually, in order to germinate, a seed requires a little bit of water on the inside of it. So as they eat a seed, they're getting that water as well. And the liquid that is in little reptiles that they eat. Long ago, think 1800s, Victorian era England, feathers were in very high demand. They're not as much anymore, but the meat and fat are valuable resources. So over time, humans have really overexploited them for their resources. So now that more conservation regulations have been put into place, they're starting to come back a little bit, but a lot of damage has been done to these poor guys. All right, we've got our ground hornbill. These I found really amazing because you can absolutely 100% tell without a doubt that the sexual dimorphism between the male and the female is astounding. Like I said, with the birds, you can really tell the difference. And this male is vibrant red. He's got a big crop that he can puff up. And in the female, which you'll see in the next picture, she's not as vibrant. These are predatory birds. They're about the size, if you think here in America, of a turkey vulture, or slightly larger. And they like to stomp around in the tall grass looking for little reptiles or small rodents. Here's the female. She's a lot more dull in color.
Marissa?
Yeah.
The word dimorphic, what do you mean by that?
Di means two.
Two.
And morphic is shape or style. So it's two different appearances. So when you have sexual being male and female, dimorphic meaning that their shape and appearance is going to be different from each other.
Okay.
Good question. The females here, you can really see in this picture, it's also in the males, they have very long eyelashes, which acts as sunglasses for them to protect their pale eyes from harsh rays from the sun. And it also protects them from getting dust as they're stomping around in the grass. We've got the hippos. We had the ability to watch this little baby hippo swimming around in the water, crawl up on land. And it was very clumsy. It was not graceful. It was absolutely adorable. But you see these huge animals and you wonder how, you know, in the water, there's buoyancy to support them. But on land, how on earth do those little kneecaps support that much weight? And they actually have webbed toes, which allows themselves to spread their weight out a little bit better to walk on land. They have territories even within the water, not just on land. And you can see here we have this really, really large hippopotamus. He's the king of the group here. And this littler hippopotamus got in the bigger one's way. This caused a tussle. And the bigger one was able to say, nope, you entered my territory, which is much bigger than anybody else's. You need to leave. He continued then to the big one to go off and eat what looked like an entire island of grass. They eat about 80 pounds of grass each night on top of what they've been snacking on during the day. And you can see here, he's actually washing his food off. So as he just chomps a clump of grass off, he's removing the mud from that island as well. He'll dip his head into the water and shake a little bit, and that washes all that mud off so he's not getting just gross dirt. Again, these are kind of vicious animals, so there's a lot of human-wildlife conflict when they do come up onto land. Very territorial and aggressive, but a simple fact of digging a hippo trench, which is just a glorified ditch, can really help to keep them away. It's just a matter of encouraging communities to dig those trenches. Then we've got another bird, the Lilac-breasted Roller. This is Kenya's national bird. It has 8 different colors. You can see a bunch of them here. And that kind of symbolizes the diversity and harmony between the different tribes and communities of Kenya. They are insectivorous, so they love big spiders and scorpions, and they're absolutely fearless. If the scorpion is larger than they are, not a problem. They will use their wings to bash the bug to bits with their wings before they eat it, which is very helpful in grasslands or agricultural areas where insect population can get out of control. These birds can come in and act as pest management. We've got the lion. When resting here, we watch this pride taking a nap. They take shelter under these croton shrubs. And we often think of crotons here in America as these orange and red crazy house plants or tropical plants. But in Kenya, where they're supposed to be, here they're just green shrubs, but they are insect repellents. So as the lions take a nap, they don't have as many bugs flying around them as they would otherwise. They are extremely social. And in a 20-hour nap day with, 4 to 6 hours of actual activity, they will rub heads, lick each other, babysit each other's cubs when needed. So their social dynamic is really important to them. There are only 23,000 remaining in the wild, so they're doing better than the cheetahs are. However, in the past 20 years, they have declined by almost half. Again, their range has really been impacted. Finally, we've got our warthogs. You can see we do have a male in this picture. He's the darker brown one closer to the front. He has 2 sets of warts. So these aren't actual warts. They're like weird bony protrusions. So they have one down by their snout. And then the males, you can see, has like a bone spur almost protruding from underneath his eyes. And the females do not have that. They are going to feed off of plants, and you can see on the male's knees, there's like a weird patch right on his knees. He'll actually drop to his knees and scuffle around on the ground with his nose down, sniffing for tubers and bulbs. And the zebra. These are considered something called a pioneer grazer. And pioneer just means that they're the ones going in first. So they'll go into a habitat first, and they will munch down the tall grass that other animals like the Thomson gazelle can't eat, and make room for other smaller herbivores to come in. Unfortunately, overhunting for their meat and their skins has decreased their overall population. All right, so now we get from the Maasai Mara to more rural areas. And as we get closer towards residential areas, communities, there's going to be, again, that conflict between humans and wildlife. But we're also going to see a unique relationship that humans have with plants, whether through agriculture or other use. Here you can see bananas and mangoes being sold. We have some adorable little rural birds. These are much smaller than the large hornbill of the Maasai Mara, and they can act as seed dispersers. So this is a red-cheeked cordon bleu that you see here. He's about the size of my fist. You can see my fist. Things like weaver birds, this bird built this nest by weaving grasses together, can help as it pulls grasses around. You can even see a seed pod has been incorporated into the nest. The seeds will fall and disperse more plants. Animals like the Hamerkop. Yes.
Question about how birds weave and tie knots. Obviously, it had to loop several of these twigs, vines, grasses around the top branch. How did they do that without opposable thumbs? Is it all just their beak? How did they do that with wings?
Their beak and their toes.
Their toes.
Yeah, so they can hold, as they're starting, they can hold on to the grasses, and they'll use their beak to kind of weave things around, and they can then pick up a foot and pull as well.
Okay, so they're standing on the branch, and then they lift one leg up and dip their face down to use their beak.
Yeah, at the start of the nest, when it first attaches to the branch, and eventually the nest gets so big that they're going to be weaving with their beak a lot more and clinging to the bottom of the nest with their feet.
Wow.
Amazing. Birds are so cool. Then you've got birds like the Hamerkop, and this guy, he is not going to be dispersing seeds, but he is an ecosystem manager. He will go to wetlands, and he manages populations of amphibians and insects as they feed in these wetland environments. They're also amazing because that little bird, which was about the size of a female duck, a female mallard duck, built that nest, that huge 4-foot diameter nest. And you see the hole there, and they'll enter, and it's this huge kind of open sphere in the center where they'll raise their young. They go out to find a frog to eat, come back with a stick and a frog. They're always adding to their nest. But you really also start to understand the importance of trees to these bird species because they provide really valuable habitat in an area like the Maasai Mara or some of these rural places that are just grasslands. They don't have a lot of places to build a nest or to hide or take shelter. So you'll see birds nesting very close to each other. You have the Hamerkop nest right in the middle. And on that kind of dead branch, right above that is a woodpecker hole that you can see, this perfectly round hole, completely different species of bird, not the Hamerkop, who also is using the same tree.
Another question.
Yeah.
Back at that, this is a huge nest. You were saying 4 foot in diameter, more than a square meter. I understand they're always adding to it. They're bringing the frog back plus another twig.
Mm-hmm.
But how long does it take just to have the basic shape and have it enclosed? Do you know that?
I do not off the top of my head. That was not something that I was told, but I can absolutely find that out for you. That's a really good question, and how they're able to survive and manage. I'm assuming it doesn't take them very long.
And I can imagine that
their need for habitat.
They have a time when they said, my day's activity is nest building.
Yeah.
You know, so they might have a few days of intense building. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I will find that out for you. I'll write that down.
Thanks.
I'll send that out with the recording to everybody. I'll add a little note here on the slide. All right, we've got more birds. These starlings are everywhere. We've got, this is a long-tailed starling, which its tail is not that long. It hasn't grown it out. We also have the superb starling, and you can tell common theme with the starlings is this iridescent blue coloration on the wings and the back, with some minor differences in, does it have black dots on the wings? Does it have an orange tummy? Things like that. But these starlings will eat fruit and insects, act as a seed disperser, and as pest management. Little sparrows, similar to ones that we have here in America, this is the rufous sparrow, will also act as seed dispersers and pollinators as they fly around to flowering plants. Then we get into livestock. Not necessarily wildlife, but there's still things that provide resources for local populations of humans. Whether you have cows or goats or chickens here, even if you're not a meat eater, you're still going to find a use for livestock. For example, cows can be used to pay dowries when you want to get married. Chickens can kind of act as a sort of currency. You take your chicken to the marketplace and you can exchange it for goods. So even if you're not going to use them for meat or eggs, you can use them as a bartering tool. And just like the oxpecker and the water buffalo, there are birds here in more agricultural and human settled areas that have symbiotic relationships. Many cattle egrets or great white egrets, herons and storks, they're going to be congregating in wetland environments and agricultural environments. They're again going to be picking off pests, eating ticks and fleas, which comes as great relief to the cattle. And they can also let both the cattle and the surrounding humans know when a predator is coming, when something scary is happening. For example, these egrets here are they're standing on a boat, on the posts of a boat out at Lake Victoria. most likely trying to eat a fish out of a fisherman's boat. But aside from stealing fish from people, they will also alert people if hippos are getting too close or if there's some other sort of danger that they need to be aware of. On top of the relationship that people have with animals, we also have one with plants. This rope here, which is used to manage your cattle, it's kind of used as a leash for goats or cows. You can tie a cow to a post and let them graze for the day without having them wander off, is made from something called a sisal agave. These are aloe cactus looking plants, and they put out a tall, roughly 20-foot tall floral spike. That spike then is chopped down and smashed over and over against a bunch of nails, which rips the fibers of the plant. Then those fibers are braided together to create the rope that you see here. And these are at so many different marketplaces around because it's a highly sought after commodity. You also have other types of farming. Here are blue gums, which are, this is a farmed grove here. You can kind of see the rows of them. They are used, you can tell they're ramrod straight, and they replace metal or concrete electrical poles. There are some issues with the fact that in an environment that already is very conscientious about water usage, these are huge water guzzlers. But there's, people have adapted to that and have figured out how to work with the environment that they're in. Varying tribes and communities tend to focus on a type of agriculture, especially in these rural areas, more than another. For example, the Kisi community loves to farm bananas. So you can tell as you drive through, oh, this must be a Kisi heavy dominated community because there's banana farms everywhere. Luo tribe, which was right around Lake Victoria where those egrets were, are known as fishermen who go into Lake Victoria for the tilapia. Some Kikuyus are very into commercial tea. So if you look at this picture here, the entire hillside, that neon green color, is black tea that they'll have commercial harvesting going on. As a pet lover, it's always interesting for me to go to Kenya and see so many dogs and cats, and I get very excited about petting them and giving them chinny scritches. But they are tools, not toys over there. So cats are very much pest control, getting rid of rodents that can carry diseases. And dogs can act as security systems. So this little puppy here at the bottom corner, he's going to grow up and be able to alert his family, hey, there's, like I said, the hyena that is laughing while you guys are asleep. That's no good. I'm going to start barking and alerting you to this. In more residential areas, there are mongoose, not lions anymore, but mongoose can actually come in and will drink the blood of the chickens as their food source. So now if you're using these chickens as a trading or as a food resource and you lose your flock, that's no good. So the dogs will bark and alert you to the danger. And finally, we are going to go to Nairobi and to the grasslands. Overall, as human population increases, wildlife populations decrease. So when we go into the city, this leaves an open hole, but it leaves that hole perfectly for environmental and conservation education groups. There's lots of people here ready to learn and that can take action. So we have a lot of different groups that come in and do work in these cities. I could do so much with what I saw here in Kibera, which I did. If you saw on June 3rd, I'll be doing another presentation about Kenya, just about how human empowerment impacts environmental quality and impacts the lives of people there with some organizations that I got to meet during my time there. So you'd like to come back to that one, you can sign up for that, and I'll get to the Zoom link for it. But we'll still focus now on the plants and animals that I saw here. To me, this was a beautiful paradise, so lush. There was a beautiful river that went through, but it was marred by these single-use plastics that were just disposed everywhere. This picture here shows the river everything that I was told about, and people bathed here. I saw a girl collecting water here. Cattle or dogs can drink here. You can throw your trash away here. It's everything. But again, the plant life really astounded me with how vibrant and colorful everything was. People would actually have these tiny little tin cans on top of their roofs with cactus and flowers in it. So flowers are a really important part of city culture here. Houseplants are one of the most common exports that Kenya has, and I found out that it is within the top 4 of their goods that they exchange. If you have ever heard of pyrethrum, this is a common pesticide ingredient, and it's completely plant derived. It comes from African chrysanthemums. So they are the top exporter of this pesticide. They have living fences, which to me is just a beautiful, beautiful way to have privacy borders. Instead of having a metal fence, you can have these frangipani trees with bougainvilleas, which are the pink flowers. And not only do they provide shelter, but they also provide some privacy. Put up a little wall there. They're beautiful. And in some areas, they can provide security as well. There's a plant that's got like weird fingers that kind of poke out to grab you, like silvery green. And if you rub up against it or get a little bit on your face, like you brush up against it, it can actually cause blindness, which can prevent predators from coming in, but also it can prevent cow thieves from coming as well. And finally, have you seen this plant before? I know I have. I was very excited about it because I have one on the windowsill right next to me. I have the Euphorbia cactus that is a common cactus house plant. They come in some burgundy reds and greens or philodendrons. These are all common house plants over here, but in Kenya, these are huge. And they're loving the sun on the equator. And so it's amazing to see kind of these house plants to me that are very small. And now I realize have rather stunted growth. See them in a habitat that they love. Finally, back to the one wildlife that I was able to see here, the baboon. They are found absolutely everywhere. This was taken in a rural area in the Rift Valley. And they're also found near cities. As we're driving along, this baboon did not care that the van was within feet of it, speeding past. It just sat there eating bananas, which I thought was kind of cute until I realized where it got its bananas from, as I saw other baboons and goats stealing bananas from marketplaces and from people. So there's a lot of human-wildlife conflict that happens between baboons, especially in cities where these baboons are not afraid of people anymore. And finally, like I said, education centers have really thrived here in Nairobi because people like us, you can see the Mzungus, the white people, as well as Kenyan school children who are coming to learn about the wildlife of their country. These education centers are able to teach about the wildlife, teach about the ecosystems, and start to get these children to think of animals not just as the annoying thing that comes and ruins their family's agricultural crop, but as a member of the ecosystem, and start thinking about ways to live harmoniously and side by side with animals. So this David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust is one of these groups. Their main mission is to protect Africa's wildlife. They really focus, though, on helping out rescued and orphaned elephants who have been directly impacted by the poaching trade. They have a bunch of projects with anti-poaching, safeguarding habitats, and just like you see here, raising awareness and doing education. There's the Giraffe Center and African Fund for Endangered Wildlife, and their goal is specifically to educate Kenyan school children. The fact that because it is a charismatic megafauna that attracts the tourists, that's an added bonus, but they really cater to the school groups that come in. And I thought it was very interesting. Their main goal is to change mindsets. So again, not just saying, oh yeah, you know how the baboon eats your family's crops. Just ignore that, forget about it. They're not being unrealistic about some of the problems that humans and wildlife have together, but teaching people how to live side by side and some steps to take to protect themselves and the animals. And you have the African Wildlife Foundation. They do work all over Africa, but do have a site in Nairobi, Kenya. And their main goal is to ensure the survival of the wildlands and wild places in a modern Africa, in an Africa that is developing. Populations are growing, and that's going to happen. That's the way the world works. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But unsustainable development, that's not okay. And there are many ways to be sustainable as the population grows. So they do a lot of work in the communities and creating sustainable policies in the government. So today, I would like to let you know that 25% of all of the proceeds from this presentation will go and be donated directly back to the African Wildlife Foundation and their site in Nairobi to be creating some of those sustainable policies to help mitigate human-wildlife conflict, and to the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, which helps to bring these orphaned elephants, bring them back out of the wild, help raise them, and then get them back into the wild so they can be creating their own herds in the future. All right, I know that was a literal ton of information, but are there any other questions that people can think of? I hear random things, but I could not understand any of it. Stop sharing my screen, and maybe if I can see people, I'll be able to hear them better if I can see. All right, were there any questions? I couldn't tell before. If there's not, that's fine. Cool. Well, thank you for coming to this presentation, learning more about the wildlife that I love and hopefully you love now as well. I hope to see some of you again on June 3rd when we do the human empowerment photo journey. I can imagine Joshua would be very interested in that one, seeing as his organization is one of the ones that I was able to go and visit and learn more about. But thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening or whatever time it is where you are.